These are 12 wide receivers that you need to be drafting in 2024 redraft fantasy football leagues. We're going to go through 12 guys that we think in their current ADPs are undervalued and can be possible league winners. So we will start off probably the earliest ADP here. We have Garrett Wilson going off as the wide receiver 8 off the board in the early second round. He's probably my favorite second round pick, as I think you're just getting a first round talent, first round fantasy pick, and you're just getting him in the second round. He finished as the wide receiver 30 last year, but that was obviously with Zach Wilson. He still had over 1,000 yards and 168 targets. But the touchdowns are what killed him. He only had 3 of them, and that's the reason for his, wide receiver 3 finish. So his touchdown prop this year is around 8. So if you just gave him 5 more touchdowns last year, he'd have been a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. So he's going to have a monster target share, as we know, with Aaron Rodgers. So let's just say like 30%, which I don't know. I think 30% is fairly low. I think you can put him even up to 40. If Rodgers throws 30 touchdowns, Garrett Wilson would be expected to score about a third of those. And if he, turned 168 targets into almost 1,100 yards in back-to-back seasons with Zach Wilson, you can imagine what that would be with Aaron Rodgers. So I think he has overall wide receiver 1 upside, just as Devontae Adams did when he had Aaron Rodgers. When Adams was Rodgers' go-to target, he was the overall wide receiver 1, the overall wide receiver 2, the overall wide receiver 3. So, and I think Wilson is just as good as Adams was in his prime, and see no reason to believe he can't do that as well. So if you're on the second, get Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I love Garrett Wilson. I'll be taking him in almost all my home league drafts. So Alex and PB, you cannot take him. I've dibsed them, so that is mine. So with the next pick here, wide receiver 23rd off the board, that is me, Devonta Smith, going in about round 4 of drafts. Devonta Smith is getting a massive upgrade this year with Kellen Moore coming over as the OC. Obviously, we know Kellen Moore from his time in Dallas. Yes, he was the OC for the Chargers, but that's not what a lot of people remember him from. Kellen Moore in Dallas threw the ball a lot. We've gone over it ad nauseum last year when he went to the Chargers, and we thought a lot of these receivers were going to have huge upside, and it really didn't pan out in California. Geez, drawing a blank where Los Angeles is. But with Devonta Smith, with Kellen Moore, the Chargers had the 3rd most passing attempts last year. We know that the Eagles do like to run the ball a lot, but I think it's going to be a little bit more balanced this year in terms of the passing attempts from Jalen Hurts, who's now fully healthy. Last year, he was pretty banged up and really did hurt, that offense in terms of, thinking about that. I mean, but they still averaged 28.6 points a game, 15 NFL. Devonta Smith, last 2 seasons, over 1,000 yards, even with A.J. Brown there. He's just as good. I wouldn't say just as good as A.J. Brown, but he has the potential to be, that 1A kind of option, 1B kind of option for Jalen Hurts in offense. And last 2 seasons, he's ranked top 16 in targets as well. So I think he's a great value getting there and another high potent offense with the Eagles. So as a wide receiver 23 off the board, I think you can do a lot worse.
Yeah, great pick.
Absolutely. All right. Coming in at our 3rd guy here, we have got the rookie Malik Neighbors, currently going in the mid-4th with an ADP at 54 and coming off the board as wide receiver 25. Obviously, we've seen the rise of rookie wide receivers the last couple of years in in fantasy football and in the league. And I think Malik Neighbors is one of the next guys up in that category. He goes to the Giants, which basically has next to no target competition. Obviously, Danny Dimes is a little bit of a question mark, but if we bank in the fact that Malik will probably see, I would guess, anywhere between 20 and 25% target share, you're looking at 130 plus targets right there. On top of Brian Dable being a guy who likes to manufacture touches to his best players. All of that said, I think that Malik has a very safe floor for a guy that we haven't seen, a season out of. I just think they're going to find ways to get him the ball, use his explosiveness, his playmaking, and I think he also has, high volume upside. Led the NCAA with 34 catches of 20 plus yards. So you get those big spike week opportunities. And yeah, I just, when you look at underdog ADP versus home league ADP, obviously, you have to factor in that QBs go earlier in home leagues than they do on underdog. But you're getting a guy in the mid fourth that goes in the early third in underdog, which is generally seen as a sharper room. And you're looking at an alpha receiver with very little target competition. So I think even if Dimes doesn't put up a great year, I think they're still going to find ways to get him the ball. And I still think you see giant spike weeks out of Malik.
Yeah. So many targets.
Oh.
All right. Next, we have Tank Dell. He's going around the 6th round as the wide receiver 29 off the board. He finished as the wide receiver 36 last year, so he was a wide receiver 3, while missing 6 games. So he missed more than 1/3 of the entire fantasy season, and he was a top 36 wide receiver. Now he's being drafted as the wide receiver 29, so only 7 spots above where he finished, missing 1/3 of the season. When healthy, he was a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. I understand they have Diggs now, which will take away some of that target share. But wide receiver 29 is such a low bar to clear for someone who flashed as much upside as he did last year, and he had the best connection with CJ Stroud. So, I think he's being drafted closer to his floor. And if I had him as my wide receiver 3, I'd be absolutely thrilled. I think you could get away in drafts if he was your wide receiver 2. But, ideally you would want more than 2 wide receivers by the 6th round. So, get him as your wide receiver 3 and you'll be very happy with your room. Oh yeah. And I forgot to mention he had, so a third of the games he played, he had over 20 fantasy points. So you're going to get those like really crazy spike weeks as well. Just great pick.
All right. Coming in with our next receiver. This is a friend of the podcast. We talk about him every single year. That's Deontay Johnson, Panthers wide receiver 1. Going in round 7, the 38th receiver taken off the board. And yes, Deontay Johnson, we've talked ad nauseum every single year how he's due with the amount of targets he was getting in Pittsburgh. Like, how can this guy not finish as a top 10 receiver with the amount of targets he was getting? He just wasn't getting the touchdowns. Well, last year, Kenny Pickett absolutely sucked as a quarterback. That's why he is no longer there. But Deontay Johnson is no longer there either. He's in Carolina. And just to give you some perspective, the years that Deontay Johnson was doing very well with the Steelers, he was playing the X position. Obviously, that is the primary outside position. But they had moved him to the slot when they took Pickens, and his target share was not as great there. When he played the X, he was getting 26.5 targets, the target share, and then 33% of the red zone targets at the X position. With Dave Canales, he has already said that Deontay Johnson will be playing more of the X position. And his ex receivers under the Canales umbrella has finished top 16 wide receivers in the last 4 seasons. He's going to have so many targets this year again. Bryce Young, second year into the system. We'll see how he progresses. You'd assume that he's going to do better than what he did last year under Frank Reich, who, is a terrible head coach in my eyes, maybe in some others, but yeah, he's going to have a massive season. The thing with Young here, he targeted his receivers more than any other quarterbacks, and he targeted his on the first read out of any other quarterbacks in the NFL as a rookie, which again just points to Deontay Johnson getting first looks and getting more targets based off of how Bryce Young kind of operates the field and his vision. I can't see him not finishing above his ADP. Johnson finishes the wide receiver 28 with Kenny Pickett as his quarterback. He was tied for 6 in targets as well. So again, he's a target machine. Just got to get the ball to him. We just got to make confident throws and have him score touchdowns, because that's the biggest thing with him. He's just regressing over year after year with touchdowns. But we saw how well Adam Thielen did in the first couple of games last year. Everyone's like, who is this Adam Thielen reborn? Deontay Johnson is 10 times better than Thielen. Deontay Johnson's going to take over those target shares in the red zone. They're going to be a much better Deontay Johnson. Target him, draft him, and you should do very well.
Yeah, I remember those weeks where we would just be, or I at least would just be betting anytime TD Deontay Johnson. He's getting 15 targets a game. He's got to get one in. And
he's due.
Week after week, just not happening.
Yeah.
But, new system.
Same it all finally comes together for him here.
Yeah, I do too. All right, our next guy that we will be highlighting is another rookie, Rome Odunze out of Washington. Going in the late 7th, then ADP around 95, and wide receiver 41 off the board right now. Obviously, another rookie here that we've seen some camp videos on, but we won't know what's in store there until the season hits. But obviously, have a loaded passing attack in Chicago this year. You got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, Swift out of the backfield. So Rome is, somewhat of a dicier play, but I think given the passing volume that this offense is projected to have, his upside is there in the late 7th, and he's in for some pretty big spike weeks as well. He can stretch the field. He can run every route in the tree. He had an average 8 out of 15.5 in college last year, which is pretty absurd. And, you don't like to bank on injuries, but if, a guy in the past who, he had a healthy year last year, but has been hurt in years past, in Keenan Allen, if he were to go down, or if DJ, God forbid, were to go down, there's zero doubt in my mind that Rome slides right in and absolutely dismantles and pays off this ADP. The Bears wide receiver room has the 3rd easiest strength of schedule all year. So I think with the new OC in there and his pass rate and his neutral pass rate, even though Rome's kind of the 3rd guy down the line, I still think he's going to get a ton of looks, and the ball is going to get spread around a lot. So going late 7th here, I mean, if he's your 3rd or 4th guy on your team, you should be happy with that.
Love me some Rome.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have Christian Watson. Christian Watson, man, he's going around the 9th round as wide receiver 44 off the board. To me, this is a guy that he's either smashing his ADP or he's a complete bust because he can't stay healthy. I don't really see an in between. If Christian Watson stays healthy, there's no way he doesn't pay off a wide receiver 44 ADP. In 2022, he finished as the wide receiver 38 while missing multiple games. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 65, but as we know, he missed more than half the season. And he was still wide receiver 39 in fantasy points per game in the games that he did play. and that was while battling an injury. So if you fade Christian Watson this year, it's because you're confident he's going to miss a lot of time, probably due to that hamstring injury. But I'm personally not going to bank on that. By the 9th round, you should already have all your wide receiver slots filled, like anyway. So why would you not take a swing at a home run with a guy like Christian Watson in the 9th round? Last year we were taking this guy in the 4th, I believe. Like people, and now and then Jordan Love. I still think he's a little bit overrated, but most people like saw him do well late down the stretch, and now you're getting a year where Christian Watson is, the hamstring is supposedly doing a lot better. He got that fixed to some degree, and now he's going in the 9th. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm taking Christian Watson every time in the 9th round, and you should too.
Yeah, and the NFL did a study on his hamstring and
it was crazy.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe just out some money, be like, hey, Christian, this is on us. We'll let's get you fixed up because we need you on the field. We need to sell some TV deals. So, yeah, I mean, great. I love all these guys that we're talking about, but Christian Watson is probably one of my favorite that we're talking about. That offense, yes, that receiver room is quite loaded in terms of a lot of bodies there, but I mean, God, what he did when he was healthy is remarkable. So
he's the one there if he's healthy.
Yeah, easily.
Right. I agree. I think he is the one. Like there's already been, they did like a practice type run of a game, and Watson was, I believe, in there on 2 wide receiver sets. Wicks was the odd guy out. Like Wicks is like the darling of the analytics, and people think he is, I think, underrated, but there's just so many mouths to feed, and I think Christian Watson is still the top guy there. So he's a touchdown machine. He's an absolute red zone monster. So I'm taking swing. And if you told me it was the 4th round again, sure, I'd probably be out there because I think there's just some other guys with safer floors and have just as much upside. But in the 9th, you're not going to find a guy with that much upside.
Well, hold your horses.
You might. There is another guy I will
coming in here.
A few more guys
coming in here. In the 9th to 10th round, depending where he kind of falls. That is me, Jameson Williams, a wide receiver, 48th off the board, and he has the 9th ranked easiest schedule for receivers this upcoming year with the Detroit Lions. Talk about a home run hitter. This is Jameson Williams. Yes, we have not seen a full season from Jameson Williams. Obviously coming off the injury, the torn ACL, his rookie year, and then he decided to bet football when he should not be betting football. Held him out for about 6 games last year. I think, was it 6 games? Yeah, what? Yeah, it was a decent chunk that he missed. So he's not played a full season in the NFL. But this is a guy who, if you do remember, at Alabama, went for 79 catches, 1,500 yards, and 15 touchdowns. That was 3 years ago. The dude, the narrative that he cannot catch is absolutely ridiculous. The dude is a machine when he is healthy. He plays for one of the most, I would say, one of the highest potent offense in the NFL with the Detroit Lions last year, their emergence. The Lions were 27.1 points. Yeah, 27 points per game, essentially, which was top 10 or just outside the top 10, I believe. They love to throw the ball. 35.9 pass attempts from Jared Goff last year. Where did half those targets go? I mean, a lot of them went to Amon-Ra, which obviously he's a clear-cut alpha there. We're not going to deny that. Now, and then Sam Laporta was a rookie, which I saw an extremely crazy stat. Rookies who scored double-digit touchdowns, tight ends, or not just rookie tight ends, but any tight end who scores double-digit touchdowns one year, the next year they regress and they do not score as many. So there's going to have to be some other placements of those touchdowns, and I can't see why it can't be Jameson Williams. There's no clear-cut wide receiver 2 there. I mean, it's our next best player and
You have Donovan Peoples-Jones and
Donovan Peoples-Jones, and then I mean it's him and Reynolds and
no, Reynolds is gone.
Khalif Raymond. Sorry, I knew it started with an R. I mean, I just can't see Jameson Williams if he stays healthy. He's not betting on games anymore. I cannot see how he cannot pay off his ADP here. There's going to be like what PB just said. Like by the time you get to this round, like you should have your wide receiver room already pretty much your starters. Like why not take a chance on a guy who has it's insane upside in Jameson Williams? I really do like him. I mean, I think he can finish as like in the top 30 for a receiver this year. I think he can go even higher than that, especially if this Lions offense is just as good as they were last year. So take Jameson Williams in the round 9 or 10, wherever he may fall.
I'll add a few points on it just because he plays in like every game is like a dome game this year for one. I think besides maybe like 2 or 3 games, they're all dome games. Second, Dan Campbell is known for being like pretty honest in his press conferences and talking about players. And, he always kind of talked like, we're working on Jameson. We're working on like in the past years, like getting him up to speed. And then this offseason, every time he's spoken about him, it's increasingly been more and more like, yeah, he's there. Like, so that's just another, like, he's going to have this full-time role. And I guess, sorry, I got ahead of myself when I said Christian Watson. There's no one else. There's maybe like 3 or 4 guys, and we're talking about most of them. The end. And then another one here.
We'll lead into the other guy, at least one of the other guys in that conversation, Curtis Samuel, also going in the 10th, wide receiver 50 off the board right now in half PPR leagues. And, like we were framing up the arguments for the last couple of guys, you're pretty much, if your starting wide receivers are not filled out by the 9th and 10th round, you probably should just not play fantasy football. So when you get to these late rounds, you're taking swings on guys with tremendous upside. And Curtis Samuel, I think, is one of those guys this year. You've got potentially Josh Allen's wide receiver 1 in the 10th round. On top of that, he gets reunited with Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator there, who, when he was the offensive coordinator of the Panthers and Curtis Samuel was there, he had his best year, was over 1,000 yards from scrimmage and finished as the wide receiver 27. So significantly higher than where he's being drafted right now. He's another guy, Corey, kind of like Jameson, where he's a gadget guy too. On top of being a solid wide receiver, they're going to give him some manufactured touches. They're going to run some end arounds, some screen plays, let this guy get out in space, let him run. With Joe Brady, obviously Curtis Samuel was a bit younger, but saw 41 carries for 200 rushing yards. So, you're swinging for the fences in these kind of like mid to late round, guys who are going to be coming off the bench, guys who are going to fill in your lineup during bye weeks, or if someone goes down, and you want to be able to put a guy in the lineup that brings you that upside. And Curtis Samuel is one of those guys in this high-powered offense. So very well could be Josh Allen's wide receiver 1. Obviously, you got Kincaid there. Shakira is getting a lot of noise out of camp, but I think when the dust settles, Curtis Samuel is beating wide receiver 50 ADP.
Yeah, I love Curtis Samuel. Don't be taking Keon Coleman. Had to get that in there. Okay. Next this is the last guy kind of in these later rounds that I think has that crazy upside. And I think this guy has a pretty solid floor as well. And that is JSN. He's going in the 10th round as wide receiver 46. This is a guy coming into the NFL, both players and scouts thought was better than Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Marvin Harrison Jr. He is my favorite mid to late round wide receiver target in drafts this year. He started his rookie year off rough by breaking his wrist right before the season, which sidelined him for a bit. His offensive coordinator never used him the way he should be used. He was running these screens all the time. He had an incredibly low ADOT for someone of his skill set, and he just wasn't the focal point of the offense last year. Now Lockett is almost 32 years old. He'll be 32 this year. They bring in a whole new regime. You have new head coach Mike McDonald and offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, who brought Washington into the spotlight with a very prolific passing offense in college. So I think JSN is the clear future of the Seattle Seahawks. And I think this year you will see him as a focal point. His career yards per route run is one of the biggest indicators of NFL success. And JSN had a career yards per route run of 3.22 when he was playing with Olave and Garrett Wilson in 2021, when he had 1,600 yards or whatever. His yards per route run was 4.0. His ability to earn targets with other studs on the field is absolutely insane. So, to put this all in perspective and to sum it up, he had, other than Puka Nacua, he had a better yards per route run than any wide receiver in this class and any wide receiver in last class. Puka is obviously, he was an outlier and he was drafted late. The Rams got their guy, but JSN is an absolute stud, and people will realize that this year. You need to take JSN in all your home leagues.
All of them.
All of them. If you miss out on JSN, I mean, you're missing out.
You're going to miss out, man. You're missing out. Sorry.
Okay, well, then you better be taking him.
Nope, dibs.
Oh, shit. All right. Coming in here, not rounding out, but coming back to kind of the forefront of the draft here, we will be talking about Drake London going in round 2. He's the 11th receiver taken off the board with a whopping 4th-ranked easiest wide receiver schedule in the NFL. Well, we all know what happened in Atlanta. They got rid of the dust and brought in the old man, Kirk Cousins, who has just been a absolute throwing machine. Kirk Cousins, from 2007, I believe, to 2000, wherever we are now, 22, he's thrown for 4,000 yards in 7 out of the 8 years. 2015. 2007 is way too early. 2015 to 2022, threw for 4,000 yards out of 7 of those 8 seasons. Very pass-heavy individual, very good individual. Last year, if you do recall, Drake London was catching passes from Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota and Taylor Heineke. Not great quarterbacks at all. And he still finished with 870 yards in his rookie year and 905 yards in last year. This is a guy who was taken very, very high in the draft and has not been utilized whatsoever. Kind of with JSN, he was the wide receiver 1, but just never had anyone throwing in the ball in Atlanta. Now we get a new look. Arthur Smith is no longer there. Thank God. We can actually see some good players play football in Atlanta. With Zach Robinson coming in, when he was with the Rams, they tried everything they could possibly do to get their alpha receivers the ball. Motions, organized, or those structured plays, the reverses, everything to get them the ball, their playmakers the ball. They tried everything. Now you get Drake London, obviously the number 1 receiver there. Yes, you have Kyle Pitts, and they brought in Darnell Mooney, but Drake London is by far and away the alpha receiver. His targets are going to go up immensely. He's going to have so many more opportunities in the red zone. Last year, 8+ targets in 12 games and averaged 88 yards. With that, you should be doing so much better. And he should be ranked so much higher in terms of how he finished last year. And now this year, he's going where he should be drafted, but he has potential upside to be, a top 5 receiver in this year's fantasy league. So where he's going, it might seem like a steep price based off his, performances from the last couple of years. But like we just mentioned, Kirk Cousins, a huge boost, new offensive coordinator, new head coach, boost. take Drake London. He's going to win fantasy leagues this year. Guarantee it.
Boost. Push. All right. Rounding us out here, finishing it up, go to a kind of early mid-round guy, Chris Godwin, currently kind of middle of the 6th round, wide receiver, 33 off the board. This is a guy who has put up 3 straight seasons of 1,000 yards. Last year, 130 targets, 83 receptions, and now you've got an offensive coordinator in Liam Cohen coming in, who was previously at the Rams, who has said that Chris Godwin is going to play primarily out of the slot this year, and that he, quote, has the Cooper Kupp role. We all know what happened with the Triple Crown winner in Cooper Kupp when Liam Cohen was the OC there. Now, obviously, Chris Godwin and Cooper Kupp, we're talking about different levels of receiver, but you just look at that volume alone, and a guy who has obviously already proven himself. Finished kind of at about this wide receiver range. I think he was wide receiver 36 last year, but he did all of that with only 2 touchdowns. So you got to assume that that's going to regress to the mean a bit. The Buccaneers are big time sling the rock. Baker in the back, in the quarterback.
Baker in the backfield.
Baker in the backfield, running it, throwing it, doing the whole thing. But yeah, Chris Godwin is also in a contract year, so he's gonna be wanting to put up some numbies, and I think he pays off this wide receiver 33rd tag, and he's a solid wide receiver too on a year-long squad. So draft you some Chris Godwin.
He's my prediction finishes better than Mike Evans, but yeah, we'll see.
Bold. Don't draft Baker Mayfield at running back, though. Don't do that.
Nice little stack there. Baker running back to Chris Godwin. All right, that'll do it for your 12 wide receivers you must draft this year. We'll be back for our receivers to avoid in the next video, so stay tuned for that. Please leave a like and subscribe and comment your favorite receivers to draft in 2024. All right, we'll see you next time.